On the 17th of November, 1998, a telephone exchange in Devon received a routine incoming call. The call appeared completely normal, until operators checked where it had come from. The source was listed as Haversham. The problem was that Haversham no longer existed. According to official records, the village had been demolished 25 years earlier. By 1975, nothing remained. No houses, no roads, no residents. Yet somehow, a call had just been placed from within its boundaries. The operator who answered later provided a statement. At first, the caller seemed confused. He asked for the date, the weather, whether the local bus service was still running. The operator assumed he was joking. Then he asked a strange question. "Does Haversham still exist?" The operator laughed. She informed him that the village had been demolished decades earlier. The line fell silent. Almost 30 seconds passed before the caller responded. According to the operator, he quietly said, "That can't be right." Moments later, the connection ended. The incident should have been forgotten. Instead, it was forwarded to engineers for routine review. What they discovered made even less sense. The number attached to the call was genuine. Records showed it had once belonged to a house on Quarry Lane, a house that had stood in Haversham before the village was abandoned. Engineers searched for faults. They found none. No crossed lines, no routing errors, no evidence of tampering. The records appeared authentic. The call had originated exactly where the system claimed it had, from a village that had ceased to exist 25 years earlier. The incident was archived and largely forgotten. Then, 6 weeks later, the same number called again. This time, the caller sounded frightened. On the 3rd of January, 1999, the same number called again. The connection originated from Quarry Lane, Haversham, a village that no longer existed. This time, the caller sounded frightened. According to the transcript, his first words were, "Something's wrong." The operator asked him to explain. The caller seemed confused. He insisted everything in the village appeared normal. The church was open. The shop was trading. People were going about their daily lives. Then he said something investigators would later struggle to explain. He claimed it was still 1973. When asked for the date, he repeated it several times. July 1973. When asked who the Prime Minister was, he gave the correct answer. For 1973, the operator attempted to explain that he was speaking from 1999. The caller fell silent. Then he asked a question. "Why is everyone saying we're gone?" The call ended shortly afterwards. Engineers once again reviewed the records. They found no faults, no routing errors, no explanation for how a disconnected telephone line could still be placing calls. Investigators then turned their attention to Haversham itself. Modern maps showed nothing, only woodland where the village had once stood. But after local newspapers reported the incident, several elderly residents came forward. Many insisted they remembered visiting Haversham years after its demolition. One claimed to have attended a church service there in the early 1980s. Another said he had driven through the village during heavy fog in 1992. Authorities dismissed the accounts as faulty memories, yet the descriptions were remarkably consistent. Each witness described the same church, the same village square, the same row of houses along Quarry Lane, including the property linked to the mysterious calls. By March 1999, more than 30 statements had been collected. None matched the official record. Then, on 14th March, the number called for a third time. The caller no longer sounded frightened. He sounded desperate. On the 14th of March, 1999, the number called for a third and final time. Unlike the previous conversations, the caller did not sound confused. He sounded exhausted. Investigators had been waiting for another call for almost 2 months. The moment the connection was established, the conversation was recorded. According to those who reviewed the tape, the caller's voice had changed significantly since the first recording. He sounded older, weaker. Several sections of the audio are damaged, but surviving fragments remain. The recording begins with an unusually long period of silence. Almost 20 seconds pass before the caller speaks. When he finally does, he appears to be speaking about people who are no longer present. At one point he says, "They've all gone." The supervisor asks who he means. The caller never gives a clear answer. Instead, he begins describing an empty village. He claims the church is locked. The village shop has been abandoned. Several houses stand open, but nobody is inside. He repeatedly asks where everybody has gone. Then the recording becomes distorted. Large portions of the tape are lost beneath interference. When the audio stabilizes, a second voice can briefly be heard somewhere in the distance. The words are impossible to identify. The caller immediately falls silent. For several seconds, neither party speaks. Then the caller returns to the phone. According to the supervisor's statement, he sounds terrified. His breathing is rapid. His voice is barely audible. He says that they were told somebody would come, that the road would reopen, that they would not be forgotten. The supervisor attempts to ask what he means. Before he can finish the question, the caller speaks one final time. The sentence would become the most discussed aspect of the entire case. "Why did you leave us here?" The connection ends immediately afterwards. No further calls were ever received. Investigators spent 3 years attempting to explain the recordings. No faults were found. No evidence of a hoax was discovered. Searches conducted at the former site of Haversham uncovered nothing. Officially, the village ceased to exist in 1973. Yet 3 recorded telephone calls suggest otherwise. To this day, nobody knows who placed the calls, or why a man speaking from a village that no longer existed believed he had been left behind.
In October 2003, a resident of Columbus, Ohio, reported something unusual. According to his statement, a house had appeared overnight at the end of his street. He insisted it had not been there the previous evening. At first, nobody believed him. The street ended in a small turning circle. Residents had lived there for years. Everyone knew exactly what sat at the end of the road. Nothing. Yet when neighbors checked the following morning, a house stood there. 2 stories. White siding. Green front door. Front porch light illuminated. No vehicles were parked outside. No signs of occupation were visible. Several residents later stated that they assumed the property was newly constructed. Until they realized construction would have been impossible. There had been no builders. No machinery. No planning notices. Nothing. The house simply existed. Photographs taken that morning show the structure clearly. However, attempts to identify the owner were unsuccessful. County records contained no mention of the property. No address had been assigned. No utility accounts existed. No building permits had ever been issued. The land itself was registered as undeveloped grassland. 3 days later, surveyors visited the site. The house was gone. The driveway was gone. The garden was gone. Only grass remained. The incident may have been forgotten. Then reports began appearing elsewhere. Texas. Oregon. Florida. New York. Each witness described the same house. White siding. Green front door. Front porch light illuminated. And according to every report, it always appeared at the end of the street. By early 2004, reports of the house had been received from 11 different states. At first, investigators assumed the sightings were unrelated. That explanation became difficult to maintain. Every witness described the same property. White siding. Green front door. Front porch light illuminated. No vehicles. No occupants. No identifying features. The details were identical. In several cases, witnesses submitted photographs. When placed side by side, the images appeared to show the same house. Not a similar house. The same house. The structure displayed identical marks, identical windows, and identical weathering. One photograph taken in Arizona even showed damage to a gutter that also appeared in an image captured months earlier in Pennsylvania. Investigators were unable to explain how this was possible. The reports became stranger. Several witnesses claimed they had entered the property. According to their statements, the interior was always the same. The house was fully furnished. The lights worked. The taps ran. Yet there were no personal belongings anywhere inside. No photographs. No documents. No clothing. Nothing to indicate that anyone had ever lived there. One witness described the house as feeling staged, as though it had been prepared for visitors. Others reported a more unusual detail. Every clock inside the house displayed the same time. 3:17 a.m. Kitchen clocks. Wall clocks. Alarm clocks. Even battery-powered watches carried into the property reportedly stopped at 3:17. The significance of the time remains unknown. The most disturbing report came from a family in Oregon. According to their statement, they entered the house shortly after sunset. When they left, less than 20 minutes had passed. However, neighbors claimed the family had been inside for more than 6 hours. Police records confirmed the discrepancy. No explanation was ever found. As reports continued to accumulate, investigators began noticing another pattern. The house never appeared randomly. It always appeared at the end of a street. And it always disappeared before sunrise. In May 2004, investigators received what would become the final major report connected to the house. The witness was a police officer from Colorado. Unlike previous sightings, he did not enter the property alone. 2 officers accompanied him. All 3 provided separate statements. The accounts were nearly identical. According to the reports, the house appeared at the end of a residential street shortly after midnight. The officers arrived within 30 minutes. As expected, the property was illuminated. The porch light was on. No movement was visible inside. The officers entered through the unlocked front door. The interior matched previous descriptions. Furniture was present. The lights functioned. Every clock displayed 3:17 a.m. The officers conducted a room-by-room search. No occupants were found. No personal belongings were discovered. Then they reached the second floor. At the end of a narrow hallway was a single closed door. None of the previous reports had mentioned it. According to all 3 statements, the door had not appeared in any earlier photographs of the property. One officer opened it. The room beyond was completely empty. No windows. No furniture. No decorations. Only bare walls. And in the center of the room stood a wooden chair. Placed on the chair was a photograph. The photograph showed the house. But it was not empty. People were standing on the front lawn. Dozens of them. Men. Women. Children. Every person in the image was staring directly at the camera. Investigators later examined the photograph. No individuals could be identified. No missing persons matched the faces. No record of the image could be found. The officers left the property shortly afterwards. By sunrise, the house had disappeared. The photograph disappeared with it. Only the witness statements remain. No confirmed sightings have been reported since 2004. To this day, no explanation has been found for the identical reports received across multiple states. No evidence of a coordinated hoax was ever discovered. And no one has determined why every witness described the same house, or who the people in the photograph were.